4652. Matt, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, Matt, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I was just a quick one on that, the thing about the schools down there at St Gregory's. That's just stupidity by our government putting too many people in too quick.
Yeah.
So that's one statement on there. That's just a deviation. I was really ringing up for what happened yesterday when you were talking to that man about Hurstville and the Chinese population there.
Yep, well, he was talking about the Chinese population, yes.
Yeah. Well, the word wasn't. The ghetto was the wrong word for it. It's an enclave. Basically, I've done a bit of work in there lately, and it's just totally overrun with the Chinese people.
Is that a problem?
It is a problem for me. Yes.
Why is it a problem for you?
Australia has an Australian culture, and if anybody comes to this country, they've got to assimilate to this country. And if it was my way to have it, and I was in charge, I'd make it that there was 50% Anglo in a suburb, and then the other 50% could be divided up under different nationalities that come in. And then when they came to this country, it was stipulated that they had to become Australian and learn the Australian way of life and speak English.
Okay, but they are Australians.
They are not assimilated Australians.
Well, regardless of what they happen to look like or what they happen to sound like.
Well, I said assimilated. They don't speak English. They don't act like an Australian person. They act like a Chinese person living in Australia.
Why are you so bigoted, Matt? What did they do to upset you?
At all. I just want them. I want Australia to be Australia. I don't want it to be taken over. They're welcome to come here. No worries.
Oh, well, that's nice of you.
My wedding were from all over the world.
Well, that's good. But I mean, the world is a great big melting pot, Matt. All over the world, people.
And I don't like the melting pot that's out there, like especially the Middle Easterns. Like they've overtaken the Bosley Park area where I live, and I don't like their way of life. I don't like their culture. I like the Australian way of life, and I don't want.
That's fine.
Life being pushed into Australia.
Okay, but I imagine if you or I went to China or Japan. Yeah. They might find our way of life a bit unusual, and we might find their way of life, even though it is theirs, a bit unusual as well.
I would show the respect, and if I had to live there and I was going to migrate there, I would learn their way of life. And I would go there because I wanted to live their way. Right? If they're coming to Australia, they have to live the Australian way of life.
No, not necessarily.
There's a lot of people out there listening to this now.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if they come...
They're on my side.
Oh, be quiet. If they come here to live, that's a different thing. If you go to Japan to live, or China to live, I suppose you've got to become accustomed to their way of life, or you won't get on very well, will you? You'll be flat out doing the grocery shopping if you don't adapt to their way of life and understand how...
That's what
I mean, but if we lived by your mantra, we wouldn't have any Italian restaurants. We wouldn't have any no Chinese restaurants. Can you imagine Australia without that? The world is a great big melting pot, Matt, and you're a bigot.
Have that. Good. Yeah, you're an arsehole, John.
Oh, charming. That's really charming, Matt. If that's what you do, Matt, are you still there, Matt?
No, you're going to let me have my say now instead of saying that I'm a bigot?
Yeah, well, I've said you're a bigot because you are. But yes, you can have your say now. Go right ahead. But don't use language like the language...
I'll tell you what, you go out there in society and you'll find out there's a lot of people that think like me.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are a lot of people who think like you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that are welcome to this country, but they have to assimilate to this country and become Australian. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that I'm against them coming here. I'm saying if they come here, they become Australian and they blend in and they mix in. Don't create enclaves like Hurstville and Lakemba, right? You make sure that the government should be controlling how many of a certain nationality, right, live in those areas, so you have an even mix. Not some nationalities taking over whole areas.
That simply happens. It's not something that is peculiar to Australia. It happens in London. What have they got in London? Earl's Court or something they call it, where all the Australians congregate. All the Australians, when they go to other parts of the world, they get together. They're a little Australian. Be quiet. They're a little Australian conclaves all over the place. So if we do it when we go to another country, why shouldn't they do it when they come to our country?
I'm saying there's a meeting point where you can go and socialise together, but those Australians that go over to England mix all over the country. They don't just stay in one spot.
How do you know that?
And that's a bad analogy, because Australians mostly come from the Anglo-Saxon background. So yeah, it's a different analogy there.
Well, that.
And whenever you go to another...
Oh, look, I'll tell you what. I don't know that you can say that. I don't know that you can say that most Australians come from Anglo-Saxon backgrounds these days. A lot has changed, but I would suggest, well, yeah, probably just a majority, come from Anglo-Saxon backgrounds. But that doesn't matter. We're supposed to live in the world, and we're supposed to get on with each other, irrespective of what colour we are or where we came from.
God, I am trying to say to you that Australia is Australia. And I don't want it to be modified by other cultures coming into this country.
How boring.
I don't want it to be modified. Australian people want it to be Australian.
And now, how do you know that? I'm very happy to encounter other people.
Oh, John, I grew up in this country. That's how come I know.
Okay, well, I grew up in this country too. Well, nearly all of my life in this country.
I've been all over this country, and I know.
Oh, well, lots of luck. So have I. Been all over this country more than once.
Yeah. Right, well, I'm telling you now, there's a lot of people out there that don't like enclaves being created in our city, especially Sydney. Right, look what's happened down there. You said about England, look at what's happened in England. It's a mess, right, with all the Muslims, what they've done over there, taking over certain areas, right, and the Pakis and that, they've done the same thing, right, but over here we've got Middle Easterns taking over whole areas, and we've got Chinese taking over whole areas, right, and a lot of Australian people are not happy about that.
Would you tell me where the Chinese have taken over a whole area?
Percival, for example, right? You go down to Eastwood and it's Koreans, right? You go to Chatswood, it's all Asian people in there. I don't know which part of Asia they come from, right? And then you go to Lakemba and it's just totally all Middle Eastern. Bosley Park now, it's got Syrians have taken over the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to note that, I mean, you're going to have to put up with it a bit, because 1 in 4 Australians was born overseas anyway. So they're Australians, but they were born overseas. 1 in 4. Do you understand that?
Yeah, and I can say it's been a mistake. It's been a big mistake.
I see. The fact that the 1 in 4 Australians was born overseas was a mistake. If they're Australian, how can it be a mistake?
This multiculturalism that's happening now is a mistake.
Okay, well, it is with people like you, Matt, because you're a bigoted man.
There's a lot of people like me, John. A lot of people like me.
I fear that you are right. I fear that you are right.
We don't want to be overtaken. You sure they come here? They're welcome to come here and work and mix, right? And mix in with the Australian way of life. That's what we want.
Well, that's what you want.
All areas and push. You go to Hurstville, you can't live in Hurstville as an Aussie, as an Anglo-Saxon. You'd be totally like a refugee in your own country. You wouldn't be able to. You'd be an alien. Right, you wouldn't be able to have a conversation. I go down to the local shopping centre where I live now, which I try to avoid, and everybody is speaking in Arabic.
Oh, really? How interesting.
Yes, it's interesting. I dare you to go down there and have a look.
I don't know. Obviously, you feel that you're superior. Do you feel you're superior?
No, I just love Australia, and I want Australia to stay as Australia was. I don't want it to be modified into these other cultures. I like the Australian way of life. I don't like the Middle Eastern way of life. I don't like the Chinese way of life.
Okay, but we've got to be able to mix. We've got to be able to assimilate. How are we going to ever have peace in the world if there are people like you who just dig your heels in and you're not about to give an inch?
You mix in and become part of this country.
There's nothing wrong with this country.
You mix in with this way of life. You mix in with the Australian way of life. I had a bloke, a mate of mine, his name was Philip, he's a Muslim bloke, and he told me he went over to Manly, right, and he called our girls sluts for walking around in bikinis. Mate, did I rip into him? I said, he's got his daughters there wrapped up in rags. Right, I said, mate, if you don't like this country, you pack your bags and you get back to where you come from.
Yes, I know. That's the cry of the weak man, Matt. If you don't like it here, go back to where you come from. A lot of them actually come from here.
Yeah, well, this guy immigrated to here, and he said that our girls in Manly were sluts because they were walking around in bikinis. And that's a fact, not a lie.
Well, I believe you, I believe you, and there would be people who were very stitched up who would think that way. A lot of people, and particularly a lot of
say to you, John,
big
are like that.
I beg your pardon?
I said to you, most of them that come from there are like that.
Are like what?
They are like what I just described to you. They've got that opinion of the way Australians live. They don't like the way the Australians live, yet they want to come here. But they don't want to assimilate to the Australian way of life.
Well, I don't know that you know that for a fact. I don't know with whom you mix.
I'm just repeating myself, John. All right,
Yeah, yes, you are repeating yourself.
see how many people back me up.
Oh, all right. We'll see how many people do back you up. All right, Matt. I was going to say thank you for the call, but I don't think I can.